counseling psychologist. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited.
A bit nervous to be honest, but yeah, excited to have this conversation.
So today we'll be touching on striking a balance, understanding substance abuse and mental health, and we know in the university space that is so common. We've seen
Yes.
students abuse substances. Some don't even know. So I'm going to ask you just a few questions. Feel free to touch on your real experiences as well. And as Mtonjeni, you deal with ETs, which are your emergencies, and sometimes they are substance induced.
Yes.
So
Yes.
tell us more about that as well.
Okay, so I'd like to start by thanking you for having me here, for inviting me for today's conversation. So yes, you are right. Substance use is a very concerning issue that is happening at university spaces. So it's not just limited to NMU. It's generally research does show that university students, because they're in that uh, what we call it stage in their life where now they are moving out of home, or not even moving out of home to move to university, but they are going into early adulthood. So which means they now have freedom to explore new things, all that. So and to meet new people from different backgrounds. So substance use, like being introduced to substances, no matter what it is, it is a big part of that. So yeah, it can it can escalate into substance dependency, even substance abuse, substance addiction, because going into adulthood and having all these responsibilities does come with stress. So you will find that a lot of students might find that it might be easier to cope with the stress, to run away from it a little bit by using substances.
So they use it as an escape, basically.
Yes, yeah.
Sure. Right. So I just want to understand, as a psychologist, can you just explain for us the relationship between substance abuse and mental health? Because I think we assume that we're just drinking alcohol for the fun of it. There's no consequence on our physical and emotional, mental side of it, but in actual fact there is a connection there. So can you just tell us more about that relationship?
Yes, so they are closely related. It can be a bit of a complicated relationship between substance use and mental well-being or mental health. But generally speaking, if you are stressed, especially if you're stressed out for too long of a time, it can have serious or concerning effects on your mental well-being. And then substance use comes in there, where as we've touched on before, substance use comes in where now you're trying to cope, or sometimes we call it self-medicate with alcohol or with weed or with anything else, to kind of numb yourself or to escape from these issues that are causing your mental health issues. Sometimes though, substance use can actually trigger a mental illness. So what we call like a substance-induced episode, like a substance-induced disorder, like psychosis or things like that. So sometimes, in some cases, it can trigger those mental health issues or those mental illnesses. So what happens is, okay, so you stress for a long time, your mental health is affected. So then you find, okay, alcohol or weed or anything else, it can help with making me feel better, even if it's just for those couple of hours or those few days. And then you find that, okay, it's really helping you feel better. So then you keep going to substances. You keep going to substances because you find that it's actually helping you feel better. But what then happens is, the more you use substances, then the worse the worse off your mental health issues get, because the issues are not being resolved.
Yeah.
So the more you use substances, or the more you depend on them, the worse your mental health gets. So then it becomes a vicious cycle, because you're getting worse, your mental health is getting worse, so then you're going to substances to cope. Substances then are making you feel worse over the in the long term. So then it becomes a vicious cycle if it's not dealt with in the beginning. It can become a vicious cycle that can be quite difficult to come out of.
Yeah, sure. And that's like, it's like a trap. So
Yes.
I'm not feeling well today, and I'm like, show me, let's go groove. And then next week it's the same thing, and I find myself, without even knowing it, I'm now suddenly addicted to substances, to weed. And sometimes, the system gets used to it, so the longer you use it, you want more and more. It's like the load or the intake of it is now increasing as well.
Yes, yeah. That is an indication of an addiction. If you find that you're now becoming used to a certain level of the substance, whether it's 2 drinks was first enough to make you feel fine, but now you find that actually over time you need more and more and more and more. So that is an indication that there could be an addiction there. And yes, you're right, it does become very hard to run away, or to solve that addiction, because before you know it, you're addicted. And it's not like you choose to be addicted. It's like it starts with that habit, going out every weekend or going out every other night, and then before you know it, you realize there's an issue here.
And now you can't even control your behavior because you're so used to, okay, this is it. Now it's beyond your control. Your system it wants this alcohol, it wants this.
Yes.
Sure. So you also touched on some terminology, but I just want us to break it down, especially for people who are not in the psychology or health field. You touched on psychotic episodes and said sometimes we have substance-induced psychotic episodes. So what is a psychotic episode?
It is basically a short period of time where you, I will say this bluntly, literally losing your mind. So the substance, whatever it is, it could even be alcohol. And I know alcohol seems very harmless.
Yeah.
What can it really do? Even that, sometimes it can trigger a psychotic episode. So a psychotic episode can be hallucinations coming in, like where you think you're seeing or hearing things that are in reality not there. It could even get to the point where you don't even know where you are. Like you can't even make sense of your surroundings. You could be at home having this psychotic episode, but it can get to the point where you're not even aware that you are at home, not even aware of the time, not even aware, like you feel it's like a completely out of body experience. And it could also come to the point where the people around you, family, friends, whoever, can't even make sense of what you're saying, because and this doesn't happen with. These are not guaranteed symptoms for every psychotic episode. It can get to that point where it's very severe, where you're not making sense to anyone, where maybe you're speaking to people that are not there, you're hearing things that are not there, and it can come with like that intense fear, like paranoia. So there could be many symptoms in a psychotic episode. So it can vary from person to person, but generally it's characterized as having that very out of body, very very unusual symptoms.
Okay, so it would be also like someone acting out of character. Would that
Yes.
be like a symptom or indicator that the person is now experiencing a psychotic or is about to experience a psychotic episode.
Yes, yeah, that could be a huge warning sign if you find that your friend or your brother or whoever it is acting completely out of character. Yeah.
Sure. This is interesting, hey? And you also touched on we tend to assume that alcohol, especially alcohol, is harmless. So, can you just tell us about the stigmas or misconceptions that we have when it comes to substance abuse and mental health? Like, we think that if I drink too much, it's not going to affect in any way my mental health. And what other stigmas are surrounding that?
Yeah, so yeah, there are are a lot of myths or misconceptions, and there is also a stigma around people who are struggling with addiction or dependency on substance use. So the common misconceptions are that you can spot someone who is abusing substances. There's also that misconception that people who are using substances in order to cope, they are irresponsible, they are lazy, they can't take care of themselves. Some of these myths even go as far as saying people who use substances are just criminals. Because you find that sometimes they're treated that way. If someone is caught with an illegal substance, they are just immediately just punished and put away. When really there could be reasons, various reasons why they have that illegal substance. So yeah, those are the common misconceptions. There is also a common misconception that that some people who are dependent or addicted to substances, they can just easily stop because they chose to be addicted to this. And as we touched on earlier, it's not a choice. It's something that you find you're in the middle of this issue now. So it's not easy to just stop. And there's also a misconception that that only the hard drugs like tic or cocaine, only like the hard drugs are addictive. When you can actually find that generally anything can be addictive.
Yes.
It just depends on your relationship with that substance. So person A may be able to stop drinking for like a year and say, you know what, I've been drinking for too long, I want to stop. But person B may find it more difficult to stop drinking because that relationship between them and alcohol, whatever substance it is, it's soothing for them. It's helping them. So then, because it's helping them numb the pain or escape from stress, it will be difficult to sever that relationship.
Yeah.
So yeah, generally, yeah. So as I said, it's not just the hard drugs that are addictive. It could be anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is why we find that people kind of maybe look down or push aside or just ignore people who are addicted to substances because they think they got themselves into the situation, they're irresponsible, they you know, what's the point in helping them? Somebody else can help
Sure.
them.
Sure. So now that person is not getting any support, basically,
Yes.
because you did this, so you deal with it.
Exactly, and quite a while back there was this whole there was a lot of talk about I don't know if it's still a common thing to think about, but this whole thing of tough love. So I'm not going to give you support if you're addicted to something. I'm going to give you tough love. And tough love, you know, it's more tough than love. It's more tough than support. So yeah, they don't get the support that they really need because of because of the stigma.
Yeah. And now I'm thinking, if I started using substances because I was not in a good mental state, and you just keep on pushing me away, and your reasoning is because I did this. So now that also pushes me further into my dark space. and then you find someone really experiencing severe mental health challenges.
Exactly. So because they don't receive support, it then gets worse. Because if there's no one there to help them, then what are they going to turn to for more help? That substance that's already been helping them. So then it gets worse and worse, and it's also that feeling lonely. Okay, I need help. I cannot just help myself, but there's no one around me who is willing to give me the support that I deserve and that I need. So then that loneliness sets in, and possibly helplessness as well. So then it gets worse. That vicious cycle can continue.
Sure. It's only getting clearer to me now that there's actually a very close link to mental health and substances, and how people can actually feel really alone. And I'm thinking now of the people we see as we walk on the streets. In Joburg, we'd say "ukunqanqatheka," but I heard that in Eastern Cape, it's "ukunqanqatheka." So that's when a person is now addicted to a point of, if I don't get something, I start shaking. You know that I can't function. And now I'm thinking of how we look at those people, how we treat them. Sometimes when you see someone approaching you in that condition, you're like, this one's gonna rob me, because they need money to get what they need, and you're not there for that person. So it's quite interesting how these are also related to just psychosocial issues like society, how we treat the next person,
Yes.
and not, we judge them without even wanting to understand why they even started. Sure. Okay, this is a lot.
It is a lot. Yeah, it is a lot.
So my next question for you is that, I know we touched on this because we did mention that people tend to use substances as an escape. So I want to know, is there maybe also another reason? What kind of maybe issues would lead them to that? Do you think it has to do with trauma? What kind of issues exactly?
Yeah, so it can be various issues. Trauma could be is possibly one of the top ones. Whether it's childhood trauma, traumatic experiences that you experienced in childhood, and trauma doesn't always mean someone hurt you, like physically hurt you, sexually hurt you. It doesn't always just mean that. Trauma could also be something like childhood neglect, where you grew up feeling very lonely in your home, where your parents weren't connecting to you, siblings weren't connecting to you, so that general neglect, whether it's physical neglect, emotional neglect, that's also trauma. So yeah, the childhood trauma could be one of the big issues, because if you have these traumatic experiences in childhood, it's not easy. It is possible, but it's not easy to process that and resolve that and heal from that, because it happened at such a young age. So that could be a big one. Also trauma that happened later in life. If you went through something traumatic, where essentially your sense of safety and your confidence was taken away, by some incident that was very traumatic. Trauma could be a big one, because with trauma, like your whole system is shocked. Like the symptoms after a traumatic incident can be quite scary sometimes, because you can have flashbacks, nightmares, things like that, and just generally feeling anxious all the time because you don't feel safe anymore. There's something or somebody that took away that sense of safety.
Sure.
So imagine feeling anxious all the time, over little things, just like traveling or being around people, social anxiety, things like that. So that feeling can be quite exhausting. So yeah, it can be that it's possible that you turn to substances in order to numb that pain, in order to make you feel. I've heard some people say they feel like a human again after they smoked weed or taken a few drinks.
Sure.
Because when they're sober, all that
thoughts.
nervousness and all those symptoms are there.
They're more in touch with what actually happened to them.
Yes, yeah.
Sure, that is sad. That is not. I don't think anyone wants to live like that.
Definitely not, yeah.
And it also does make sense because I've seen people who smoke weed. They seem happier when they are high. They're just floating in the air, and you'd swear they are the happiest people. But in actual fact, they are facing, challenges that they seem like they can't overcome.
Yes,
Think,
yeah.
Sure. You also touched on confidence. I know the saying that when someone does something when they're drunk, that means it's something they really intended to do. Like they've been thinking about it all along.
Right.
So now that they're doing it when they're drunk, now I'm thinking of confidence. Is this that kind of confidence?
Oh, the confidence that alcohol can make you.
Yeah, and you cannot do things that you were scared of.
Right. Yes, yeah, in a sense, it's that kind of confidence, right? So if you are completely sober, not under the influence of anything, and you're able to do things that scare you, like telling somebody how you really feel about them, or confronting an issue with somebody, or just doing things that that you'd normally do, like maybe taking a spontaneous walk or spontaneous swim, things like that. Like that shows that there's confidence there.
Yeah. Okay.
But if you can't do that sober because that fear is like so strong, or that you don't feel confident enough to go after what you want. So if you need substances to help you feel more confident, it's kind of like a false confidence, and it could happen where that confidence is there, but it's hiding.
Yeah,
So I
okay.
wouldn't. Maybe false is not the right word for it, but what could happen even then is that when you sober up and you think about the confidence that you exhibited the night before,
Sure.
you, it could really hit you like, yo, did I actually do that? This is not me. But really, when you were under the influence, that part of you came out.
Sure. And some that may be nice in cases where a guy or a girl confesses their love for the next person. But now there are cases that are actually more serious than
Yes.
that. Like a person who has had suicidal ideation for a long time, and but has not had the courage to go through with that, and suddenly they feel like, okay, let me just drink myself, or let me be high, let me do this so that I can officially and finally do this.
Yes,
And
yeah.
unfortunately, there's no comeback from that. It's unlike how confessing your undying love to someone. You can take that back. You can say, no, I was drunk, no, I was. But this one is permanent. And
Yeah.
how do we navigate that? How do we move from that?
So suicidal ideation, that is like if you actually act on that and it's successful, then yes, that is a very permanent decision. And suicidal ideation or self-harm, things like that, those are one of the many risky behaviors that you can take while you are under the influence. And they're considered risky because they could be a harm. It could harm yourself, not just with attempting suicide, but in other ways as well. You could be a harm to yourself or a harm to others. So also like getting into physical fights, that's also a risky behavior that could happen when you're under the influence. How to come back from that is to, if you find that this is what is happening when you get drunk, or high, or generally under the influence, firstly, it is a good step to become aware that this is actually an issue for me, and I don't want this to happen again.
Yeah.
So that's when you seek support from professionals, from whoever. You start thinking about, okay, what can you do to change? What can you do to change, and specifically not depend on alcohol, or limit your alcohol intake, or substance intake, so that these risky behaviors are diminished. Especially if you find that your suicidal thoughts are increasing while you're under the influence. That can be very concerning, because you don't want to get to that place where it becomes a very permanent decision, where that chance is taken away to make changes that you want in your life.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we also touched on how we, as a society, treat people who might find themselves addicted. So how would you say, or like any suggestions, how can we better support? And aligning with you, because I know that counselors, psychologists, social workers are there to support, people who are addicted in various ways, in various fields. But how can, as a society, how do you feel that we can join hands with the field and support people facing such addictions or substance abuse?
Well, on a societal, there is a need for change on a societal level, but it will always start with the individual. So on a societal level, we can have these preventative interventions where there's like information campaigns, where we have these talks, with groups of people, in order to spread the information, spread the knowledge about the link between substance abuse and mental illness. To have these open and honest conversations with each other, in order to better understand, because the stigma comes from lack of understanding. So the more we do these things, have these conversations amongst each other, it leads to the stigma being reduced. Because then we become more empathetic, more compassionate, more understanding of those who are struggling with substance use. But it does really start with the individual as well, because what I do as a person can inspire the next person to do the same. So, on an individual level, we can start fostering or building that curiosity. In order to start understanding something, you have to be curious about something. So instead of just judging or labeling people who are addicted to substances as irresponsible, as lazy, as all of these things, you can try to be more curious, and that starts with just questions. Just a simple question as to, why does someone end up addicted or dependent on something? Being curious about knowing more about this issue, so that you can inspire the next person to do so. So being openly curious, being trying to openly understand, so that the people around you can see that actually, this is kind of better than just labeling someone.
All right, thank you so much. So this is my second last, just to be on the safe side, second last question for you. So you touched on psychotic episodes being also sometimes a result of substance abuse. So Adam Tonjeni, I just want to know, what happens should a student come with such a case? How do you support like the processes internally at M20 Student Wellness?
Okay, so here, usually if somebody's having a psychotic episode, at a residence or somewhere, somewhere at NMU, any one of the campuses. Generally, it's somebody who brings them in, because someone who's psychotic, they may struggle to get themselves to Mtonjeni for help. So it's usually someone, whether it's a friend, a lecturer, a residence manager, they will bring them in. So that's the first step. So those people, that support structure in that moment, they can call or come in, and then what we do once the person is at Mtonjeni, what we do is the counselor will sit down with the person, with the student, and kind of have a conversation. It will look and feel like a conversation, but in that conversation, the counselor is kind of assessing how severe is this episode, what kind and what kind of help the student needs. So if they are psychotic, it is likely that other institutions will be brought in to help. So specifically hospitals.
Okay.
If you're psychotic, as I said earlier, you're having a completely out of body experience, you're completely out of character. So that means you cannot really function. So that's where you'll need the hospitals, so that the student can be treated at the hospital. Treated and put on medication if need be.
Sure. Okay. Thank you so much for that. I think I will end it there. So we've learned, and we also see the link between the two, and not only substance, but the society, the individual, and the different departments. You just mentioned right now the hospital as well coming to the party. So it means that we are joining hands as a society and the different, institutions and departments. So I will be closing it there. Thank you so much to everyone who might have joined in, listened, and remember that Mtonjeni is on every campus, and we are available Monday to Friday from 8 to 4:30. So that is it from me, Khanyisa Zibe, social worker at Mtonjeni Student Wellness. Thank you.
Thank you.